Now, I want to be a good host without introducing our first guest, our keynote speaker, Mica Alaniz. So what can I say about Mica? Mica is a senior software engineer at the DNC, where she builds tools to promote voter education and empowerment, as well as support grassroots organizing, fundraising, and supporting all their the Democratic candidates and their data needs in campaigns across the country. In her spare time, she teaches workshops for under-indexed individuals in tech on Git. She also teaches app development, leadership in the remote workplace, and other topics. She's a co-organizer for PromptConf Chicago, mentors at Write Speak Code, and is a 2020 Code 2040 Fellows Program mentor, and maintains an inconvenient baseball empire. She's a Chicagoan, and she's born and raised. She's Chicagoan, born and raised there, and has this thing with coffee where she needs it to live, essentially. So, without further ado, our amazing keynote speaker, Mica Alaniz.
So, as mentioned, my name is Mica Alaniz, and I am a senior software engineer at the Democratic National Committee. So I want to start by saying that there is nothing more empowering than the unequivocal truth that I am not alone. The technology we have at hand may grant access to information and tools, but for me, it's the connection to other people that care about the same issues I do, and the work we're able to do together as a community that really opened up what I thought were my possibilities and my opportunities. When I began to tie my success to the progress of the communities I belong to, it made me so keenly aware that I could affect real change in the world, and in doing so, grow professionally in a way that I never thought possible. But I think we probably need to back up a bit. So I didn't really get involved in politics until late 2016, like November. I graduated from grad school with this tech-adjacent degree, and I spent the intervening time till 2016 just day-to-day working at several small companies, agencies, an art school, a startup. The whole time, I was learning, growing my skills, finding there were new things I wanted to do and learn. Through these various jobs, I pivoted into new roles until I found myself realizing that the days where it would suddenly be 5 p.m. were the days where I was coding. I had begun a somewhat non-traditional path to being an engineer, a common refrain for those of us from underrepresented backgrounds in tech. So I went from this academic background in design and digital strategy to my last role before this one, where I built responsive web applications for Fortune 500 companies. And this is where I was in 2016. I think we can all agree that 2016 was a much simpler time. The end of 2016 was typical for me. I donated, I participated in the age-old millennial pastime of posting cat pictures as hot takes on social media, and I voted. And I knew I was even just doing that, just the act of voting, more often than most. And that was really the extent of it, of my involvement. At this point in my life, my biggest concern was actually personal yet professional. I realized I had hit my 5-year mark of being in the workforce, and I didn't really feel like I was where I wanted to be, where I should be, or what the path forward even was. So I want to pause and speak to whoever this is resonating with, wherever you are in your career. You know there is the next step to take, but you're not really sure what it looks like. Or you do, in fact, know what it looks like, but you have no idea how you're going to get there. This is about where I was. I wanted to think more critically about professional development, about networking, contributing more, maybe getting a promotion, obviously about making more money. And I wanted to work on ever more challenging problems. Hopefully, all of this would culminate in being granted more opportunities. That's how it's supposed to work, right? I worried that part of my frustration with my career growth was that these opportunities were, I believe the word I used was granted. that they could be gated behind biases, expectations, or are simply just too few to count on. And these opportunities, they're also not typically announced with confetti. If they were, I probably wouldn't have been so lost in trying to figure out what was next for me. After the 2016 US election, I spent a lot of time reflecting, both on my career and on the state of the world. All of this was running alongside this pursuit I had to find where I really felt was my place. But what I began to realize was that this felt pretty familiar. That feeling of not making the difference I wanted to in the world while also feeling a bit stagnated and maybe even a little bit bored, that feeling had come up before. And the answer had been staring me in the face this entire time. As I had been taught by my parents and as they had been taught by theirs, I met that feeling by putting in work. Primarily for me, this came in the form of volunteering. There was this parallel thread throughout my life and in addition to my day job that I had never really seen as continuous because it was so many different causes and kinds of work. They seemed only connected together by my caring about them and therefore deciding to put the work in. I took this instinct I had and I matched it with the restlessness about where my career was at the time and maybe just a little bit of anger. It was 2017 after all. And I went for it. What was it? Apparently, it was sending a cold email to an email address that had begun with info@, which in fairness, I did not have the highest hopes of getting a response. Because what I decided was the answer was to take what I knew from building apps for Time Warner and Anthem and throw it behind a local politician, a Chicago alderman named Amaya Puar. He was, at that point that year, the only person who had announced that he was running against the most local politician I was a constituent of, whose policies and platform did not align with my own, former Illinois governor, Republican Bruce Rauner. So the Puar campaign website in January 2017 was actual hot buttered garbage. Not only did I never think to take a screenshot, but the internet Wayback Machine also failed me. But trust me, it was bad. Bad enough for me to ask in this cold email if they didn't just want me to call voters or knock on doors, which I was happy to do, but if what they wanted from me and from my skill set was a new website. As I mentioned, I never thought I was going to get a reply or had any idea that the email was going straight to the campaign manager, who knew full well what they had was not cutting it and was desperately hoping to hear from people, from someone exactly like me. In short order, I went from the first engineer to lead engineer to a technical director role over the course of nearly a year in the campaign. I ran a team of nearly 40 people across the entire state of Illinois and directed, in fact, all of engineering, some design, and a little bit of data for the campaign. My focus was in making sure that we took in all comers and we were willing to teach a lot of people what they needed to know, be it political context, tech skills, or the data tools we use in order to help us most effectively. Our volunteers ranged from all over the state of Illinois, from Rockford to Cairo, from a data scientist for NASA to a high school student who created our subreddit, to engineers at major tech companies, or even ones still in college at SIU Carbondale. We had a packed volunteer event, and we asked who had never worked on a campaign before. Most of the hands in the room went up. I wasn't alone. And we weren't alone. And most of volunteer leadership came from private sector. We were all working professionals who found ourselves bringing the same expertise and problem solving we did to our day-to-day work to what was for many of us as well, our first political campaign. We all landed in the same place at the same time. And we worked on initiatives that are very commonplace now, and especially this year: virtual town halls, social media videos, and ads. We paired classic organizing tools with things like texting and text banking. We did Reddit AMAs. We brought best practices and professional grade technology to our goals to the point where we began to hear the question, Why is this campaign punching so far above its weight class? Each volunteer was empowered to find the best solution, and we did so with surety, defiance, and the assurance that each idea deserved as much thought as the next, that each individual was here to present their best. I believe in large part this was because the leadership team was mostly comprised of people of marginalized gender identities and was a good percentage of people who were queer and or people of color. This is a fact that I've noticed is much more common for many organizations since then, and is a trend that I find heartening, but that I also believe bodes well for our success as intersectional communities. If I started out 2017 worried that I wouldn't be challenged enough or granted new opportunities, volunteering on a statewide grassroots campaign was in fact exactly where I needed to be. And that work was happening at such a breakneck speed that I barely had the chance to soak in that I was being asked to do a lot. Specifically, I was being asked to do things I had never even thought to ask to do. And frankly, I'm not sure in any other context would have been asked of me. I was being asked to architect, to lead a team, to weigh in and to call shots, to decision make and run things the way I saw fit. About 6 months into the campaign, someone linked to a Medium post in a political volunteer community had said that the DNC was looking for engineers. The week I found out that my complete why the heck not application ended in an offer was the week the campaign announced that we would be leaving the race. It made my announcement easier, but obviously bittersweet. I hadn't mentioned that I was moving along in the process to nearly anyone at the campaign because I was going to be heartbroken to have to leave it. So I can't stress enough 2 points here. One is that I had never been given the opportunity to lead before I worked on that campaign, nor had ever been encouraged to ask. I took the reins because it's what had to be done to achieve everything we had to, and not doing so was not an option. Someone once told me at an event that purpose is ego killing. To me, that means that once I had found my purpose, no one was going to get in my way, not even and especially not myself. Because of that experience, I had the confidence to even consider to apply for what I thought at the time to be this stretch job. The second point was that I actually did have tremendous support at my previous company, but I didn't feel like I had the room to really grow there, especially now that I learned I was fully capable of a lot more than even I would have expected. Even just in interviewing with the team at the DNC, insofar as interviews always go both ways, I knew this was going to be different. If I began this process with an open question of where I could find my place, it was in the interviews that I thought, here is where I could make a real difference. As I mentioned, my experience with the campaign did give me a lot of confidence. But when I realized I was interviewing with a team comprised of women and people of color, I definitely relaxed just enough to do well. This kind of representation is important, not just for that reason, but also because now that I am here, now that I am a member of this team, I know I have the agency in all my work and all the projects I own to be decisive, defiant, and assured that my ideas will be given as much thought as the next, that each individual on the team is there to present their best. The DNC tech team is comprised of some of the most talented people I could ever hope to call colleagues. And it is at its core founded on the principle that there is no excuse for any team or any department, even and especially the tech team, to not reflect the diversity of the Democratic Party. If I'm burying a lead here, if I've kept any secrets from you so far, it is this, that the coolest part about volunteering, about eventually working at organizations that are fighting for progress, the very best part about it is the people who made the same choice, who chose to put in the work with you. Since starting at the DNC in 2017, I have learned and grown so much. I have been able to focus my attention on the important work of voter engagement, voter empowerment, and voter education. My team at the DNC, the voting services team, is not only behind iwillvote.com and voyavotar.com, but the data and services that power these centralized voter resources. Every election year, these apps become the centerpiece of so many of the organization's voter outreach programs. But this year especially, it is so important to help people quickly and easily find information about voting in their state. Despite the fact that my current role, that my job has become fighting for the causes and the values I care about, I definitely did not let up on my, at this point, lifelong dedication to volunteering. I text bank with organizations like Open Progress Text Troop and Voto Latino. I mentor at organizations like Code 2040, and I focus on teaching, speaking, and centering under-indexed communities in tech, like the ones I belong to. It became important to me that I open the doors behind me that were closed before me, which is why I think far more people could be taking the path I did to fulfilling work that makes our communities and ourselves better for having done it. So these kinds of volunteering I just mentioned, a few hours a week with discrete tasks and specific events, that largely maps to what people think of when they think about volunteering, like weekends one would spend in an animal shelter or answering calls on a hotline. But how does one find something that helps them grow out of their professional comfort zone, find work with a purpose that teaches skills you can apply beyond a volunteer role and still impacts your community in a positive way? In these remote first times, many organizations are actually opening their volunteer opportunities beyond their immediate communities, even if the organization's focus is to better those same communities. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that our crises are shared, but so are our hopes, and so can be our help, no matter what community is impacted and at every level, whether that community is global, national, or local. So here is where you open up a window you can type in or find a pen and paper. I have a few resources I think can help people get started on changing their career trajectory if they want. Specifically, I wanted to focus on places where you can find opportunities like the one I had, where you could definitely bring your tech skills or learn new tech skills in the service of a greater good. The first and my personal favorite of the general purpose volunteer sites is idealist.org. Not only are you able to filter by tech skills, but they offer their opportunities in English, Portuguese, and Spanish, much like this very conference. I have seen some really interesting and international projects pop up on Idealist, such as opportunities to apply UX design skills or even learn Python. The next is a similar service called VolunteerMatch, which is another great general purpose site that also allows users to sift through opportunities by skill sets like technology and cause. One of the best things about a site like VolunteerMatch is that it's pretty well known among many different organizations, leading to a lot of listings and a lot of variety to choose from in the projects you work on. There are also organizations out there like DataKind that connect nonprofits with tech and data professionals to help these organizations figure out their tricky data science problems. This, in addition to providing meaningful problem-solving experience and mentorship to early career data scientists and analysts. Finally, if you're dedicated to using your powers for good, like I am, and you want to work with progressive organizations like Indivisible and March for Our Lives, you should take a look at the work being done by Ragtag. Ragtag has a great community and a wide variety of projects to contribute to as a progressive technologist. And now, I couldn't let you all go without advocating for putting in time at a campaign, like I did. Working on a grassroots down ballot campaign can be so incredibly impactful to the candidate, to yourself, and to your community. Maybe you send your own cold email like I did and are willing to see where your new career path takes you. But if you're not sure where to get started, and I don't blame you, Tech for Campaigns is an organization that is working on exactly that problem. The problem that smaller, more local campaigns don't have the same access to talent as national campaigns do. Tech for Campaigns aim their amazingly talented pool of volunteer professionals at not the high-profile seats that get a lot of attention, but at some of the 7,383 state legislative seats up for grabs, including races in battleground states like Texas, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Michigan. If you have an interest in a paid role either before or after a volunteer one, a great resource for progressive and social justice job opportunities is at all-hands.us. Many of the organizations listed, like Digidems and others, are optimizing tech skills while training and are looking for digital organizers and technical leaders to win races, fight for progress, and build careers that merge our values with our expertise. There is so much work to be done and so many ways for us to lead and to grow. I hope that those I spoke to earlier who don't really know what their next steps will be, or really all of you, as we may all someday be in that position, recognizes that the opportunities for us to be the leaders we hoped for extend far beyond the jobs we happen to have and far beyond the limits of what we might think is possible. If you're not seeing your chance to grow in your career, I want to make sure everyone walks away with the understanding that you can create those chances by finding ways in which you can learn while doing good for yourself and your community. In this way, I realize I've been pretty fortunate. I had these priorities at the end of 2016, born out of insecurity surrounding my own professional future. And I'm able to put them together with brand new, laser-focused priorities I found after the election. But none of this would have happened had I not considered first how I could help my more immediate community, how I could focus my attention more locally, and how I could contribute what I do professionally to shape my state into one that reflected my values. And that work proved to be important enough to fly in the face of what I could and could not do. That need was great enough to absolutely warrant sending a cold email in January to an address that had no right doing anything but bouncing straight back. Everything since then, in putting in the work for myself and my community, helped me realize that without a doubt, not only was I not alone, but that together we are, in fact, a force. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so much,
Mica,
for an
for an amazing
amazing talk. I will be
I
on
will be
camera
on camera in a second,
but
I
wanted
wanted
just to mention that I, as a
Latinx,
love
love
hearing
hearing
stories
from
the diverse community that we have,
because I
because I
see
see myself
in
in certain aspects,
and
I do
I
believe
do
that
believe
brings us
that brings us
together. So
together.
I
So I appreciate you sharing your
story
story
with us.
with us.
If I
If
could
pivot a bit,
if we
if we
could
could
jump into a
a
Q&A,
Q&A,
if
if
it's
it's
okay with you, Mica?
Sure.
Fantastic. So, just touching on a point that you made earlier in your keynote, you spoke kind of about the non-typical path that we take, certainly that Latinxers kind of take. These paths might be all different. They are all unique to us, but it seems that it's not something that's necessarily addressed in education before we go out into the world and try to figure things out.
Could you speak a bit more about your journey and what you learned along the way, and maybe what you're still learning?
What I learned along the way. I mean, I think what's really important is that we don't talk enough about how much learning is basically done on the job. I was able to learn in the positions that I had, and then able to kind of like stretch out even into positions where I wasn't an engineer into like doing work that was a little bit more interesting or challenging to me. And then basically, I think, which is pretty common, by switching jobs and doing that instead all the time, moved into the roles that I have now as an engineer, where I feel like I've settled. But even then, I think that the job is learning. Being an engineer, especially working in technology at all, is learning. And it isn't the case that you like walk in the door and sit down for an interview and like, you know everything you're supposed to know, even if there are interview processes that feel that way. It is the case that what you need to do, what your final deliverables are going to be as your work, are going to be things you learn how to do while you're doing it, basically.
I can sympathize with that, definitely. So, and speaking a bit about the learning piece, are there any mentors, be them technologists or not, that have inspired you to do the work that you do?
I definitely think that, I guess this is like a little expected, but it's, my parents really inspired me. My mom worked at Illinois Bell. She's the reason that we always had computers in the house. They would throw them out after a year. Like they weren't leasing them, they were buying them. And this was like around the time where like a new computer would come out every year. And so her and other people who worked in the offices would bring them home. So I always kind of looked to her and like her work ethic and her like facility with technology. And also her willingness to let me play with these computers, which I was to understand were expensive, as being like a big force in me, like learning. And then my dad has just always been involved in like local politics and local organizing. He's a member of SEIU Local 73. And yeah, like definitely taught me a lot about how to be an engaged community member and how to be, you know, not just that, you know, civically engaged person, but also a Chicagoan, as he is as well, and also a Chicano.
Beautiful. And speaking of the kind of the mentoring that you received from your parents, the learnings, and pivoting a little bit to your work within the campaign, you know, you mentioned that you all took, you know, these volunteers and taught them certain aspects of the work, or maybe all the work that they would do. When did this piece of mentoring come into the work y'all were doing? Was that something that emerged organically as oh, you know, we can take this opportunity to mentor, or was it there from the start?
It is so much easier to just take someone who's obviously very motivated to help you and teach them what they need to know than sometimes it is to like try to find people who have time or expertise to like come and do the work you need. So that is actually kind of a little bit of the cheat sheet way of doing it, is that we had so many engaged volunteers, and at least in terms of engineering, a lot of them were younger and earlier in their careers. And I realized there were things that I needed to teach them, specifically with the website project was something I had a lot of baseline understanding of how we would do this, but not enough hours to do it myself.
Yeah.
And I do recognize that when that is the case and you have people looking at you somewhat expectantly, it is your job to like bring them to the level where they feel like they're making not only just the best contributions they could be making, but are also, you know, being utilized effectively. People are donating their time. You want to make it worth it.
Absolutely. I have had conversations with many younger Latinxers. I hope I can keep stressing this enough. When they come into a conversation, they all have value. They have something to contribute, and
Yes.
To see mentors or individuals in leadership positions appreciating that and appreciating their time is amazing to hear. Now, speaking of skills, speaking of the teaching, a more current topic, what technical skills would you recommend individuals to invest in if they're considering work specifically in civic and political technology?
That is such a hard question because we work on a little bit of everything. You're kind of going to get put on every kind of project. And it is, again, back to the learning piece, like even as, regardless of where you are in your career. So like even for myself as like a senior engineer, I am constantly learning things that I did not know were necessarily going to be like on my resume at the end of the day. And that is actually kind of back to my last answer, because like that is what is needed. So it's so difficult to like answer that question with like, you need to learn this language or you need to learn that stack. Because in fairness, like the best thing is to just be like really good at learning because you're just going to keep doing it. It may be in fact the case that like the best thing you can do with like 30 minutes of your time is like text bank. And that is not the wrong answer or a bad answer. It is good to know, I will say, about organizing. Like it's good to know about the tools and the ways that volunteers, contribute to the campaign. Kind of being on a campaign teaches you a lot about campaign goals. There's things like fundraising, there's certain kinds of metrics you're trying to hit, and what kind of tools will work best. But it's different all the time. And it is also the case that you want to be prepared, but like by being that interested in being so prepared, like you're already like so far ahead of where you need to be.
Yes, I have echoed certain parts of your thought there in terms of in the roles that we're in within technology, we continually iterate, find new things to learn, make yourself better, and it's something that I hope permeates different industries and different communities. Just to wrap up a bit, we're celebrating Latinx Heritage Month, of course, and here with OctogatosConf, of course, we had to do it during Latinx Heritage Month. Any parting thoughts you'd like to share on how do you encourage people to celebrate?
Oh man, that is such a good question. How to encourage people to celebrate? I mean, I gotta say, my favorite part about my culture is my food. Like that's not at all a controversial answer, I'm realizing.
How dare you say food?
But it is something where, especially that, I mean, a lot of us are kind of at home a lot. I have definitely taken to making some of the recipes that I know take a little bit longer that I can kind of watch in a big pot. And that is something that I think, people should find the things that they themselves, want to celebrate. And for me, that's, making things that would take a long time that I, in a previous life or in the life where I'm leaving the house a lot, would have been difficult to kind of have sitting on the stove all day. So that is something too where that would be amazing, and also kind of like a little bit of self-care.
Which is definitely needed right now.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So you heard it from Mica. Go make your tamales at 6 a.m. Go get your pupusas. Start going with the masa.
Yes.
And celebrate with food if you can. Mica, amazing. Thank you very much. This Latinx appreciates you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.